Tonight, the NHL slate might not be the biggest of the season, but it's the kind of slate where sharp bettors pay attention because value is hiding in places the casual fan never looks. 5 matchups, 5 different styles of hockey, and 5 opportunities to find edges if you're willing to dig deeper than surface-level narratives. And that's exactly what we're doing here on Beyond the Box Score, where every breakdown is built on data, context, and real predictive reasoning, not hype. So buckle in, because today's matchups include desperation spots, revenge angles, home return letdowns, and total trends that quietly dominate under the radar. Let's get into it. We start with Tampa Bay versus Toronto, essentially listed as a pick 'em with both sides sitting around -110 and a total set at 6. Tampa Bay walks into this matchup carrying a 3-game losing streak, and what stands out most is the disconnect between their shot volume and their scoring output. They put up 32 shots on goal against the Islanders and allowed only 19, yet still walked away defeated, extending a trend where the Islanders have now taken 3 of the last 4 meetings from Tampa Bay with scores of 4-3, 5-3, 5-3, and 5-2. Tampa Bay hasn't just been losing, they've been losing as a favorite, dropping games to the Islanders, then Pittsburgh, then the Islanders again, and the market continues to price them as if the skid is temporary. Toronto, meanwhile, enters off a shootout loss to Montreal but hasn't dropped back-to-back games since November 20th and 22nd. That's over 2 weeks of stability in the win-loss pattern, showing that this team has been strong at preventing extended cold stretches. The key piece of context here is that Toronto placed goaltender Joseph Woll on injured reserve, shifting their defensive stability and putting more pressure on their skaters to outscore opponents rather than lean on the goaltending to bail them out. Tampa Bay, despite their slump, also enters with the emotional spark of having just extended a key defenseman in Ryan McDonagh, a sign the team is reinforcing belief in their veteran core. When you combine Tampa's desperation, the 3 straight losses, the fact they were shut out in their most recent outing, and the public tendency to lean toward Toronto at home, this projects as a classic bounce-back scenario. Tampa Bay sits at 16-10, far too strong to sleepwalk through a 4th consecutive defeat. Teams of their caliber generally respond with urgency, and that's the kind of spot sharp bettors hunt for, not trend chasing, but identifying when the market overreacts to a losing streak. Based on those angles, the lean here is toward Tampa Bay on the road. Next, we move to the Kings in Utah, with Los Angeles listed slightly as a -101 to -105 favorite depending on the book. The Kings sit at 13-8, while Utah enters at 14-13. The Kings have dominated this matchup historically, winning the last 3 meetings going back to 2024. Los Angeles comes off a brutal 6-0 victory over the Blackhawks, notable because that came immediately after losing to the Blackhawks as a massive -191 favorite. That's a classic case of a team correcting itself after underperforming, and they corrected it emphatically. Utah, on the other hand, enters off a 0-2 shutout loss to Calgary after winning back-to-back games. The real angle here isn't about home ice advantage, in fact, it's the opposite. Utah returns home from a 6-game road trip in which they went just 2-4. Teams in the NHL returning home after long travel often play flat, distracted, or sluggish, not because of lack of effort, but because life responsibilities, family obligations, and routine interruptions all hit at once after being away for an extended period. It's the classic first home game letdown, and it shows up repeatedly across years of betting data in hockey, basketball, and even baseball. The Kings aren't the best road team, but the scheduling dynamics matter more here than talent. Utah may very well settle in after this game, but this matchup aligns heavily with the Kings' advantage. With Utah just returning, with the Kings carrying momentum from a dominant win, And with Los Angeles historically performing well in the series, the lean is toward the Kings to get it done as the slight favorite. Our third matchup of the night features Buffalo and Calgary, another near pick-em with Buffalo around -108 and a total of 6. Both teams enter with 11 wins, Buffalo at 11-13 and Calgary at 11-15, but the series history leans heavily toward Calgary, who has beaten Buffalo twice recently by scores of 6-2 and 5-2. However, those results set up a natural potential regression spot because Calgary rarely wins consistently in extended streaks. Buffalo enters this matchup off back-to-back losses, falling 2-5 to Philadelphia and 1-4 to Winnipeg, which often serves as a trigger for elevated focus and pushback, especially when facing a team that's beaten them multiple times. Calgary comes in off a shutout win over Utah and a victory over Minnesota. But here's where the angle sharpens. Calgary hasn't been a team that wins 3 straight games often this season. The last time they even approached that was on the 19th, 22nd, and 23rd earlier in the year. Even more telling is that teams generally regress in the game immediately following a shutout victory, meaning their defensive intensity drops slightly after such a high-effort performance. The last time Calgary recorded a shutout against San Jose, they followed it up by losing 3-4 to Winnipeg. This season, that was their only other shutout performance. That sets the stage for Buffalo to come in hungry after consecutive losses, facing a Calgary team that historically struggles to sustain momentum. Given all that, Buffalo becomes the logical lean as a road dog-leaning favorite of sorts, and this is one of those spots where situational angles outweigh the surface-level stat comparisons. Next, Detroit heads to Vancouver. Detroit sits at 15-11, Vancouver at 11-5, and both teams enter off wins, Detroit beating Seattle 4-3, and Vancouver defeating Minnesota 4-2. Both teams also share something unusual: neither has won back-to-back games in a long time. That sets up a tricky matchup where predicting the winner becomes less about momentum and more about offensive tendencies, and that's where the total becomes the sharper play. Detroit has been a consistent over team, hitting 7 overs in their last 8 games. Their recent scores: 4-3 over Seattle, 5-6 in a shootout versus Columbus, and 5-4 at Boston, reflect a team that forces opponents into high-pace, high-event hockey. Vancouver, meanwhile, has been an excellent over team on the season at the 3rd of September 17, but curiously has not gone over in 5 straight games, pushing only once in that stretch. With a total of 6, the opportunity for a push adds cushion. Over bettors prefer totals of 6 in these exact types of matchups: offensive potential, defensive inconsistency, and trends pointing towards scoring regression rising back upward. This is a matchup where Detroit's style almost forces Vancouver to open up, and with both teams showing volatility, the total becomes the clearest angle. The lean is the over, and if playing a side, Detroit would be the preference, but the stronger position remains the total. Finally, we close with Minnesota at Seattle, with Minnesota as a -130 favorite and the total set at a rare 5.5, which instantly signals how strongly the under has been trending, particularly with Minnesota. Seattle comes in struggling badly, losing 5 straight games while being outscored 20-9 in that stretch. Minnesota has been a strong road team for an extended period and enters at 15-9, compared to Seattle's 11-9. These two teams haven't met this season, but Minnesota won both matchups last year, 4-0 and 4-3. Minnesota is coming off back-to-back losses to Vancouver and Calgary, but they haven't lost 3 straight since late October, over a month ago, which builds another reinforcement angle that they rebound in this position. Seattle's losing streak includes a 3-4 loss to Detroit, a 4-9 loss to Edmonton, a 0-4 loss to Edmonton again, a 2-3 loss to Dallas, and a 0-1 loss to New York. Seattle isn't just losing, they're getting outplayed in multiple phases. With the total at 5.5, the initial instinct might be to take the under with Minnesota trending that direction, but the risk in this matchup is Seattle becoming an active dog and forcing additional scoring variance. Because of that uncertainty around the total, Minnesota on the moneyline becomes the cleanest approach. Seattle is simply too messy right now, and Minnesota historically avoids prolonged slumps. The lean is Minnesota on the road. And that wraps up the 5 NHL breakdowns for today. If you've got your own leans, predictions, or angles for tonight's slate, drop them in the comments. I always want to see how you're reading the board. And if you're new, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss these daily breakdowns the moment they drop. This is Beyond the Box Score, where every pick comes from real analysis, not guesswork. I'll see you in the next one.